And we want this to be a very interactive conversation. And Tracy will guide you through some questions to use the chat. And so without further ado, I think I will introduce Tracy. Tracy Fink is a Northeastern graduate. Thank you so much, Tracy, for being here. She got her MBA in 1991, and she's an experienced leadership coach and resilience expert. After many years in the corporate world, empowering leaders and driving changing leadership paradigms, she now runs the Tortoise Institute, which promotes emotional intelligence and compassion as a key driver to building resilience, a superpower in today's rapidly changing world. So without further ado, Tracy will be leading this masterclass. Questions should be put in the chat. If you want to say anything, you speak up. You can use the RTS language, which is right to speak. Otherwise, Tracy will lead us. Thank you, Tracy.
Great, I'm so excited. Wait, Betsy, before we get started, what is right to speak mean? I'm not familiar with that.
Oh, that's just like if someone in the chat wants to actually kind of raise their hand or say something, or they have a topic they want to say. So that's just kind of, you can also raise your hand if you want. But I've found on these chats, it's very hard to monitor who actually wants to speak or not because there's so many people. And especially on today's call, we have, over 75 people who wanted to hear what self-compassion is all about. Okay, there we go.
Great. Well, thank you, Betsy. It's really a pleasure, and I'm so excited to give back to Northeastern that has given me so much over the years. And these last few years, I've become re-engaged with the Northeastern community because my husband's been working in the Boston area. So meeting people in person, coming to the campus, being a mentor for the WISE program. It's been absolutely thrilling and wonderful. So thank you for this opportunity, Betsy, and for providing this community. So self-compassion. Hello, can you hear me? Okay, good. I'm back. So self-compassion is, I find it's been such an interesting topic these days. What's been really funny for me, I don't know if that's the right word, but I've been teaching this for many, many years, and I've been trying to bring this into the corporate world. And for many years, people have been very resistant to this, that it's too squishy, it's too sticky, we don't like to talk about things like love or compassion. Well, as soon as this COVID outbreak happened, people cannot get enough of this because this is a time where we are called upon to be excessively human. And that means having compassion for each other and for ourselves. So before we get too far into this, I want to invite you to write in the chat box, when you think of self-compassion, what are some of the words that come to mind? And it could be anything at all. I just want to get a gauge as to what your thoughts are on self-compassion, some of the words that best describe it to you. Just enter it in the chat box and we'll go through it. Acceptance, we hear that a lot. Forgiveness, vulnerability. Opposite of self-critical, absolutely. Patience. Not a perfectionist. Slack, listening to your body. Being kind, paying attention. Time for things that matter to you. Appreciation, empathy for yourself, yeah. Taking one day at a time and enjoying the journey. Wow, yes. Wondering is there anybody who have some words that maybe are not so positive about self-compassion? Like, I remember I've given this talk and some people feel that, they were undeserving or anxious about it. So that's okay too. Even if you don't write that in, I just want to put it out there that That's all part of this too. Prioritizing this fear. Yes, this fear that self-compassion can slide into feeling sorry for yourself. Absolutely. There is a lot of uncertainty around self-compassion, and we'll get into that, maybe some of the myths around it or some of the beliefs. And the research now tells a different story, and that's why I love this topic. That you will appeal weak or new agey. I love that. Thank you. It means letting yourself off the hook and not taking responsibility. Yes. Thank you for sharing these things. This is also what I'm talking about. So self-compassion is on the whole spectrum of how we see ourselves or what we feel we can give ourselves. So great. So thank you, everybody, for sharing those words. I'm just going to plug in my laptop because I see my battery's draining very quickly. Okay, so what we're seeing now, so that people won't be held accountable, exactly. So what we're seeing now are that many companies, many organizations are looking to create these cultures of compassion because they're realizing that it is a superpower and that people are human beings and they show up for work as their full selves. And in order to engage employees and to make them feel psychologically safe, they're realizing slowly, not every company is doing this, but they're realizing the role that compassion plays in corporations and organizations. So Google did a study to see what made the most effective teams. And what they found, you know, they looked across their whole company, and they analyzed different teams, the makeup of the teams, the composition of the leaders, where they went to school, and they weren't able to identify any of those markers that made the most effective teams. But what they did find are the teams that are most effective are the ones where the members felt psychologically safe. And what psychological safety looks like at work is being able to speak up without fear and also embracing failures. So compassion, creating these compassionate workplaces that lend themselves to the psychological safety, we realize now is a business decision, that it makes a difference as to how companies perform and how employees are effective. So compassion shows up at work and in organizations by asking, how are you? And waiting for an answer. By giving good, honest feedback, by encouraging people to talk in a meeting. One of the companies that's most known for compassionate leadership is LinkedIn, and Jeff Weiner is the CEO of LinkedIn. And he has really built a culture of compassion. And we could see how that has translated into business because LinkedIn is a company that has had some incredible staying power. And Jeff, I call him Jeff because I think we would be friends if we knew each other. But Jeff has been ranked as one of the top CEOs in America by Glassdoor, which is an anonymous ranking system for companies. So compassion has a place in the workplace, and self-compassion, of course, does too. And the reason why I mention it this way is because not everybody comes to this table as like, yes, I'm all in for being self-compassionate. It's not easy. You know, we're raised in a culture where, as some of these comments have indicated, where we need to be tough, where we think that if we're soft or if we offer ourselves some self-kindness or some love, that we won't be held accountable, that we won't be responsible, or that we won't be motivated. So I'm here to talk, to put a little different spin on it, a little different light. So today we're going to talk about what self-compassion is and what it isn't. I'm going to teach you a few tools and tips to take away with you. And if you're open, I'm going to do a guided, if you want to participate, we'll do a guided meditation at the end. It's called RAIN, and I know some of you are probably familiar with that. It's a way to be more compassionate towards ourselves using this acronym of RAIN, and I'll get into that later. I'll share some stories and some research, and we'll have a good time. Okay, so, oh good, I see somebody's doing this too. So a lot of the material that I get about self-compassion is from Dr. Kristen Neff. She's a researcher at the University of Texas in Austin. She studies self-compassion extensively, and she has really opened my eyes to what this could be. And Kristen, another one of my friends, who would be my friend if we knew each other, what happened to her that really got her, I guess the story that resonated with me that she tells is that her son was diagnosed with autism when he was 2 years old. And she talks about this time where he had a temper tantrum in the, on the playground. And because her child looked like every other child, she felt that people didn't really understand what was happening, and she felt the judgment of the other parents. So as she was trying to calm down her son, who was flailing and inconsolable, in that moment, she realized that it was her who needed that self-compassion, that it was her who needed the kindness, that she was the one who was suffering, and that she was the one who had to talk herself down. Because when she did that, she was able to show up so much more fully and more open-hearted for her son. So what she talks about is that self-compassion is not, it's not about being nice to yourself that you never get anything done. And it's not about your self-esteem, like how great you are. It's more about being okay with your imperfections, or being okay with the imperfections of the hand that you've been dealt, being okay with the imperfections of your life or of the world. So right now we have a lot of imperfections in our world, and many of us are suffering. And so what self-compassion is how can we alleviate our own suffering? And we suffer in different ways. So it's, sometimes we suffer from self-doubt. Sometimes we suffer from anxiety or these persistent thoughts of lack of motivation. And maybe today we're suffering from our fears of financial insecurity, or health issues, or maybe we're caring for someone else. So we all have suffering. But what self-compassion teaches us, this idea of getting out of the churn in our heads and getting back to a path of decision-making and effectiveness and being okay with what is. See, the idea is that we accept that we are imperfect, we're going to naturally be kinder to ourselves. And when you realize how difficult it is to accept that we're imperfect, we naturally become kinder to other people, because all of these people who we have these expectations of and want them to be different, we're realizing that it's very hard to change, and it's very hard. But the thinking is, and the idea is, that we have to start with ourselves. Invariably, when I tell people what I do, that I teach emotional intelligence, self-compassion, somebody says, oh, my boss needs that. My husband needs that, you know. The thing is, we have to start with ourselves, because when we start with ourselves, then we have the ability to change the world. Thich Nhat Hanh is a Vietnamese, I think, refugee who turned Buddhist, and he talks about the Vietnamese refugees who came over on the boat. And he said when the boat were faced with challenges of terrible weather or sickness, he said if one person kept calm, they had the ability to change the temper of the whole boat. So my thinking and what I'm learning myself is that when we have our ability, when we have the ability to practice self-compassion, when we have the ability to stay calm, we also can change the temperature of where we are. So it is it's definitely a practice, and it takes kindness to stay with this. So self-compassion actually helps us be more motivated to change, and we'll talk a little bit about the studies that have shown us this, and it actually does make us take more responsibility. So there are about 2,500 studies right now on the benefits of self-compassion. The larger literature suggests that it does not make you selfish. It actually makes you less selfish because we're giving to others, because we understand, because we're filling ourselves up first, which enables us to give to others. And this is a shared human experience, because when we realize again that everyone is imperfect, we're going to be a lot less self-focused. We are focused more on the striving of what it takes to be in the situation. So what Kristin Neff talks about is that self-compassion has 3 components to it. So there's a mindfulness component, which is being able to tune into your own suffering. We're navigating all of the stuff that's happening right now is big, and we have not experienced many of these challenges before. So being able to really acknowledge how difficult this is a mindfulness exercise of really being present with what is. So it's not about denying, it's not about suppressing, it's not about wishing it were different. It's actually being with the pain and the suffering and the self-doubt and the worry and the anxiety. I was talking to a colleague of mine yesterday, and she was planning an event, and she was really worried about that the event was not going to go well, and that we weren't going to get any people to come. And the truth is, I said to her, "Have you ever done this before?" She said, "No." I said, "Are you being measured by how many people are coming to this event?" She said, "No." And I think just by asking some of those questions and allowing her to see this picture a little bit differently, she started to develop, and because I'm so into self-compassion, because I'm teaching this daily, I was able to show her a different way that she could be kind to herself and still be successful, and that the event was going to be successful, even if one person showed up. So that was, there's a lot of opportunity to not only practice for yourself, but to be able to remind other people who are kind of going off on a tangent that it's okay, let's bring it back. What is happening right now? So that's the first element, is mindfulness, paying attention to this present moment. And the second component is this idea of shared humanity, our common humanity. We're all in this together. We're all suffering from something. We all have our ideas of how things should be. Yet it's not. It doesn't always go the way we think. And what happens is when we are in that place of vulnerability or low, feeling low or shame, we tend to retreat. And what we've learned is that it's actually the human connection that makes us feel better. So it's that sharing, and then somebody says, "Hey, yeah, me too. That happened to me." And the shared humanity actually makes us feel better and makes us feel more kindly toward ourselves. So that the second element is common humanity. And the third component of self-compassion is just this idea of kindness and love to ourselves, holding our pain with love. And again, this is not romantic love. This is not sticky, squishy, oh, love. This is empowering. This is, how can I be kind to myself in this moment? What are some of the words that I can use that allow me to feel strong? how could I talk to myself as if I were a best friend, knowing some of those words that I use when I talk to my friend who's suffering or struggling? Can I use them on myself? The idea is that we already have these words in our vocabulary. We already have this treasure trove of kindness that we give to others. How can we give it to ourselves? How can we remember to give it to ourselves? I was talking to a banker friend of mine who is a highly successful, she blows me away with her responsiveness and her intelligence and her ability to multitask and all of these really amazing qualities. So we're working on a project together, and I hadn't heard from her. And I was a little concerned, so I called her. You know, normally we email or text because that's our relationship, but I called her. And I got her at home because obviously she's at home with her 3 kids. And her kids are school-aged kids, so she is navigating that and still trying to keep up that reputation of being a #1 customer, client service focused, amazing superwoman. It's not sustainable. It's really hard. And she was beating herself up all over the place. I'm a terrible mother. I'm a terrible, I'm a terrible service provider. So I taught her this trick, which I'll teach you now too, about hold in those moments when you're feeling just completely overwhelmed and beating yourself up, hold your own hand. Because when we hold our own hand, it activates the parasympathetic nervous system. Because as mammals, we're conditioned to touch. Touch is the main way that conveys care and safety and love. So, our parents, when we were babies, they held us really tight and we felt safe. So when we hold our own hand, or even put our hand to our heart, or if our hands are clean, we can hold our own face. And that begins to automatically slow the body down, even if our minds don't readily follow. It'll bring us down. So when I taught her that, just her tone of voice relaxed and she softened. And there was so much more room for possibility and solutions and for kindness towards herself. So my question to you, and I'm going to put this in the chat, I'm going to invite you to put your answers in the chat box. Why does it sometimes seem so hard to be kind to ourselves? Why is it hard to be kind to ourselves? And I mean, this is a very general statement because I'm sure some of you are very kind to yourself. But why does it seem hard to be kind to ourselves? I know for me, I did not have a self-compassion role model. I never saw it at work. I didn't see it at home. And so when I first learned this, I didn't even know this was a possibility. So yeah, many of us hold ourselves to such high standards. Supposed to put everyone else first. This is our, some of the ways that we are taught. This is great. It is a muscle that you have to learn how to strengthen. And what I love about self-compassion is that it can be learned. Yeah, the imposter syndrome. Kindness can make you feel like you're being lazy or giving yourself too much slack. This is so interesting, and I'm sure other people feel this way, that it's easier to forgive others than it is to forgive yourself. Even for the same mistakes. How many other people feel that? I do. And here's this idea of worthiness. We don't deserve it. I love this idea about Superwoman. I was working with a coach a couple of years back, and I don't know, we got into this discussion about what did I want people to think of me? And I said, well, I want people to think that I'm smart. And she said to me, well, how are people going to know that you're smart? And I said, well, I'm just going to tell them everything I know. And as I'm saying this, I'm realizing how ridiculous that is. But that was how I was raised and thought of, and we have to, we always have to have all the answers. And what she said to me was, actually, she said, being smart is about asking thoughtful questions. That's how people will think that you're smart. I was like, okay, that was a big game changer for me. So, but to recognize that that was my belief system. That was how I was raised. And of course, I wasn't kind to myself because I can't possibly know everything about everything. So yeah. So many of these common themes are showing up. So it's not being satisfied with where we are, not being okay with what is. Yeah, absolutely. We only got positive reinforcement when we excelled. It's so true. Yeah. So this seems to be a very common situation that people are feeling. Self-compassion and self-love are gendered in society. It's hard for everyone, but especially for men. That's interesting. I think, yes, we're socialized differently. Although since I've been teaching and talking about self-compassion and talking about it from a place of strength and superpower, many of the men who I work with are much, much more likely to realize, wow, the way that I have been going about this might not be the right way, especially as it relates to their children or to their employees. I often tell this story about self-compassion. So a child brings home a bad report card and he brings it home to his dad, and his dad says, "This is disgusting. I am so horrified that this is the report card that you brought home. You are such a loser. You're never going to amount to anything. Get out of my sight." And same boy brings home a bad report card. And this time, the response he gets is, "Wow, this is a bad report card. What happened here? How can I help? What do you need? What did you learn? Where do we go wrong?" Meanwhile, you're the boy and you're the dad, just so you know. So my question here also is, who's going to be more engaged? Who's going to be in it longer for the long run? Which approach is more sustainable? Because yes, we can be hard on ourselves and we can say, "You are a loser, you're never going to amount to anything. Why did you do this?" But after a while, it's unsustainable and we start to burn out. So this idea of, what did I learn here? What do I need to know going forward? How can I help? Yes, this is a bad report card. So we're acknowledging, yes, this happened. And how can I help? How can I be kind to myself in the future? So just getting to some of the research, because I think it's important to talk about where some of these ideas come from and how they can change. We think about self-compassion and some of the questions and some of the statements that had come up is that if we are kind to ourselves, we're going to avoid hard problems. And if we're kind to ourselves, we're going to have like a lapse of ethical judgment and start to go off the rails and do bad things. And if we're compassionate to ourselves, we won't be motivated to change and we won't put that effort in. And I heard that from several of you. I read that in the chat room. But here's the thing. So there was a study that was done, I think at the University of California at Berkeley, by Brenis and Chen, and I can send you that link, and I can put the link in the chat box about the study. They were evaluating how the participants responded to setbacks and mistakes and their own weaknesses. And what they did was they divided the participants up into 3 groups. There was a control group who got no intervention. There was a self-esteem group that were asked to journal about the positive attributes about themselves. And then there was a self-compassion group who were asked to journal about their perspective of the perspective about them from the eyes of a beloved teacher or coach. And then they were given a difficult task. And what they found was that the self-esteem group scored higher than the control group, and the self-compassion group. The self-compassion group scored higher than the self-esteem group and the control group on all of those 4 dimensions. So that in terms of avoidance, the self-compassion group had a higher growth mindset, or a growth mindset where they believed that they could change. And the self-compassion group was actually more motivated to correct past mistakes. They were more motivated to ask for help and to learn from others. And the self-compassion group was also much quicker to forgive themselves, to improve after a setback. So the self-compassion, as the study suggests, is a more effective way to meet our challenges than doing nothing or boosting our self-esteem. So, any questions here? Stop for a minute. Does that resonate with anybody? All right, so I'm just going to move on then. Oh, what are your top tips for communication, your message about the importance of self-compassion to others? So, Betsy, just you mean like how we talk about self-compassion? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, my question is a little bit more, your message is so powerful and the research is so powerful. And if you have people around you, to your point before, where you thought that other people could benefit from this, how do you get them to be interested in this? How do you get them to like open up?
Well, I mean, I know for me, the way that I've done it is to talk about some of the things that I've learned and some of the improvements that I've made in my life. You can't be preachy about it, and it's not about, you know, look how great I am, I'm kind to myself. It's more like, this is what's helped me. I see that you're struggling. This is what's helped me. Because really, as I said, you really have to start with yourself, and people will start to see some of those changes in you, and they might be curious and say, wow, I noticed that you handle things a little bit differently, or you're less hard on yourself, or you're approaching things from a place of kindness, or your language has changed towards yourself. You know, we don't even realize how many times we say, oh, I'm such an idiot. I can't believe I'm such a jerk. I don't know what I'm doing here. And we say it out loud, and, you know, we think nobody's listening, but people are listening, and also our bodies hear everything that our mind says. So we start to embrace that, we start to live that. So it's not, we can't change other people. We can only be of service when they ask for it. And we can only really, I think, model the behavior. And also, I talk about what I've learned. I talk about it on a regular basis. It's from the sense of, this is what I've learned, how can I help you? And as it's right, as they said, as you change, people will respond differently. Sharing your own experiences from a place of service, I have found to be very impactful. And that's why I always encourage people to share what they've learned. It's not that you're not conceited and you're not braggy, you're inspiring. And when people say, wow, Betsy, she's like me. If she can change and be different, I can change and be different. And I always say that to people. I'm not a superhero in that I have, you know, anything more than this, something that I've learned, and now I want to share it. I didn't develop this. I just learned it and can talk about how it has impacted me and my life. So I think that's how you can bring it to others. I spent a lot of time, when I was in the corporate world, I spent a lot of time trying to give my gifts to these people who didn't want them, who weren't interested in them, who were afraid of them, who were resistant. And at that time, I was ignoring this other group of people who were like, yes, Tell me more. This is helpful. I love this. And so what happened was, when I realized that you're not everybody's cup of tea, and that those people were not going to be the ones that you were going to be able to influence, it was amazing how my world was like, oh yes, these are my people. These are the people that I can influence. These are the people who are going to come to me and ask me questions, who are going to be curious, who are going to have that growth mindset, who are going to ask for help. You are not going to be able to change anyone or everyone. And that was a really big lesson for me. And this is not everybody's cup of tea. Self-compassion is not for everyone, although I believe it could be for everyone. And I've seen some really positive changes. So, all right, so I'm just going to move on because in the interest of time, the best way to use self-compassion, well, oftentimes when we're in pain or we have a nagging feeling that we wish something were different, or we're caught up in that persistent churn of self-doubt or anxiety or pain or fear. So we remember that when we feel the pain, we can say to ourselves, okay, this is a moment of suffering. And I actually say, okay, sweetheart, this is a moment of suffering. And I talk to myself with the kindness that I would want other people to talk to me too, that I would want my best friend to say to me, because we don't always have access to people. And what's been really hard about the virus, especially, is that the people who we would turn to, who would offer us some of this compassion and love and kindness, we're not seeing, we're not with them, they're not in our daily lives. So we have to be the one to offer it to ourselves. And I was telling the story the other day that also because we're living with people who, if you're living with people, I have this expectation that they're going to fix it, or they're going to make it right for me. And if I'm suffering, then it's on them to make me happy. And that is untrue and unsustainable. So what we have to do in this practice of self-compassion is use the language for ourselves that we would like other people to hear. And that falls into that third component of self-compassion, that kindness. So we use words like, it's okay, it's going to be okay. I got you. I'm not going anywhere. I hear you. I love you. I feel you. I'm not going anywhere. There's nowhere else I'd rather be. And when we say those words and practice that over and over again, we begin to build up this resilience. We begin to empower ourselves with this strength, our own inner strength that we have. It's not always, we don't always have the time for self-care, like, when we're feeling anxious or we're feeling those pangs of self-doubt, we can't always sit and meditate or get into a hot bath or take a walk in nature. We don't always have the luxury for that, but we can hold our own hand, and we can put our hands on our heart if it feels okay. Or a small little micro practice that we can do in the moment, taking an in-breath, breathing in, I do my best. Breathing out, I let go of the rest. And that is something that we can do anytime in a split second. Breathing in, I do my best. Breathing out, I let go of the rest. So, how do we use self-compassion to manage anxiety? Many of us are feeling that anxiousness. So right now, in this height of this pandemic, we don't have the luxury to get rid of the anxiety. It's here. It's actually here. And so we feel it I don't know about you, but I feel it in the supermarket. Even before I go to the supermarket, I start to feel that anxiety of, oh, who's going to be close to me, and with the mask, and is there going to be any food, and how am I going to wipe my stuff down? And I do start to feel that. The financial insecurities, all of these things that many of us are feeling right now, or the persistent self-doubt or the unworthiness. So how do we manage that? So as we go through our own crises, whatever it is, we try to be with ourselves as kind and compassionate as possible. So we can't make the pain go away, but what self-compassion can do is help us bear the pain so that we can be with it, so that we can run toward it instead of pushing it away. We kind of bring it in and say, yes, this is here now. This belongs. But what happens is many of us are on autopilot, that we don't even realize that we have a choice, that we have a way to be different, that we can respond differently because we're so used to saying and doing the same things, or we are working on habits or assumptions or distractions or judgments. And all of these things keep us in this autopilot realm. So part of this practice is, how do we wake up? How do we get off autopilot and recognize that we have a choice, that we can be different, that we can respond differently? And that's when, we practice taking that pause to wake up. So Viktor Frankl is a Holocaust survivor, and he is famously quoted by saying that in between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in that choice lies our growth and our freedom. So what he's saying here is that something's going to happen. How we respond to it is really the only thing that we have control over. That takes practice. That takes awareness. That takes a lot of self-compassion. That takes a lot of forgiveness, because we don't always remember to take the pause. We don't always recognize that we haven't taken the pause. So that's where practices like meditation come in, where we learn how to take a pause, where we practice taking the pause over and over again. That's where, this idea about being different, it's not that we're better than anybody, it's just that we're trying to be different, and that's when talking about it can help us be different. So it's where we also change some of our habits, putting our phones down, or really monitoring the news, or the time that we spend on social media. These are all the things that we can do to get off autopilot. Feeling our feet on the floor. Just that simple habit when we're standing, instead of picking up our phones, or instead of, being taken by fantasies or memories, maybe just practice what it's like to feel your feet on the floor. And that is a practice of being present. And that's what we are, that's what we need, that's what we're practicing in self-compassion, being present with what is. The breath is really helpful. That micro practice, breathing in, do my best, breathing out, I let go of the rest. Sometimes we don't even know that we're breathing. So just paying attention to the fact that we're actually breathing is something that can help us be present. When we're taking a walk, so often we're just walking, we're not even utilizing our senses. That's another way to be present. Really utilize your senses and all of your different experiences when you're eating. Notice what the food tastes like. What does it smell like? Where did it come from? How hungry am I? when we're driving. We can really practice this in the moment. You know, turning the radio off and feeling the car, feeling the steering wheel in our hands and the feeling of the gas pedal. We have a lot of opportunities to practice this. And it doesn't have to be grand gestures of 20-minute meditations. It's small moments many times. It's taking the breath and realize, I'm breathing. It's noticing the breeze on your skin. It's giving someone your full attention. And what did that feel like to make that connection? These are all the ways that we practice being present in that moment. So I want to invite you to, we're going to do a short, not small, it's a short meditation on building self-compassion. So I'll prompt you. Betsy, if you can put up the slide, because I did this presentation and some feedback that I got was that they did not want to see me reading my notes. So this is also just a lovely visual of this is spaciousness that we can get by practicing self-compassion. So this is a meditation called RAIN, and it is a acronym, R-A-I-N, and it's a step-by-step guide really to how to be with what is. So when you're stuck in fear, you can find more balance or more spaciousness. When you're stuck in self-doubt or feelings of unworthiness, or when you realize that you're not being kind to yourself. This is a practice with time, over time, and with practice. This can help you find some of that spaciousness to be different. So I'm going to invite you to sit comfortably. You can close your eyes or not. However you feel most at ease is fine. And see if you can find where your breath is clearest to you or strongest for you. Maybe that's in your nostrils, in the rise and fall of your chest, or the fullness of your belly. And just rest your attention there. Keyword being rest. This is just a normal and natural breath. Breathing in, breathing out. And now I'd like to invite you to bring to mind something that is burning up in you, something that's hot, that is maybe about the current crisis, or maybe it's a feeling about your own health or safety, maybe something about finances, something that elicits a difficult reaction like anger or fear or shame or hopelessness. Maybe a conflict with a family member, a failure at work, failure at home, a conversation you now regret. Take some moments to enter the experience. You might even want to get an image of it, a visual of the situation. We're looking now for something that might get you anxious or agitated. If there are other people involved, you can bring them in. And sense here what you're most afraid of. Or sense the most distressing moments. Now we're going to begin to incorporate this practice of RAIN. So the R in RAIN is recognize what is happening. So you ask yourself, what is happening right now? Notice whatever is predominant. If it helps, you can name it, saying fear, worry, doubt, anger. You can whisper the word, say it silently to yourself. You can witness it. And the A for rain is allow, which is allow what you're experiencing just to be there. You're sending a message to your heart to let this be for the whole experience. You might even acknowledge it with the word yes, or this belongs, or let be. You might be saying yes to this part that you hate, that you're saying yes to something that you would normally run from. But in this practice, we're allowing it. We're not trying to judge or push away or trying to control anything that we find. So R is recognize, A is allow. Now we're moving on to I, which is investigate with a gentle, curious attention, curiosity. Awakening your natural curiosity. Where in your body do you feel this emotion most distinctively? What emotions are there? Are these feelings familiar? Is it something I've experienced earlier in my life? How does this part want me to be with it? You might even check in with where you feel it in your body, in your throat or your chest or the belly. Putting your hand on the body part where you feel it. Breathing into that place in your body. And continue to investigate, what does this actually feel like? Is there tightness, aching? This takes courage. Asking that fearful place, what do you most need right now? Is it love, or forgiveness, company, connection, acknowledgement? So we're moving from recognize to allow, to investigate, and now to the N, which is nurture. This is in some way offering some care or loving attention or loving presence from your most awake and wise heart. Responding to what that most vulnerable place needs, that vulnerable part needs, and offering that love or forgiveness or attention. Touching into this place with those messages of, you're okay, I got you, I'm not going anywhere, you're not alone, I love you, I'm here for you. Kind of bathing yourself in that love and self-care. Let it wash through your whole being. And then after the rain, see if you can notice the difference. See if you can notice a sense of spaciousness or resiliency, or feeling something larger. My beloved child, break your heart no longer. Each time you judge yourself, you break your heart. You pull away from the love that is the wellspring of your vitality. But now the time has come, your time, to live and to trust the goodness that you are. So when you're ready, you can open your eyes if you've closed them. Maybe move your body in a way that it's calling to be moved. Stretch. Maybe give yourself a hug. Feel the sense of safety and care from your own touch. And when you are ready, Betsy, maybe you can bring us back. So I'm putting in the chat box, this is the rain meditation is from Tara Brach, for those of you who aren't familiar with her. She writes and speaks a lot about compassion. She recently wrote a book called Radical Self-Compassion, and she modified this rain meditation for this idea of self-compassion. So it's been very helpful to me. What do you all think of that meditation? Was it helpful?
Thank you so much, Tracy. That was incredibly powerful, both your talk and getting us thinking about what is self-compassion and what it means to us, and why it's hard to practice it on ourselves. I'm going to definitely be practicing the pause. Really, thank you so much. And I do want to say part of these Miles Masterclasses are to promote Northeastern alums who have their own business. So I'm putting a link to the Tortoise Institute, which is what Tracy runs. So if anyone has further questions or wants to hire her to do this for their teams at work or other groups, please get in touch with her. We will have a follow-up email with discount codes and all that kind of thing. But Tracy, thank you so much for giving back to Northeastern today, to our community. We had faculty and staff and alumni and students and friends on this call. So I think this was a wonderful midday treat. I have to jump on conference calls now, and I really don't feel like it. So thank you all for joining us today. We have other masterclasses coming up on maternal optimism, on leadership, and we're also looking for suggestions for more classes as well. So Tracy, do you have anything final to say?
Well, really, thank you so much for the opportunity. And I just want to remind people that this is a practice, and that anything that we practice, we get better at. I don't want people to say, well, you know, I took an hour course in self-compassion. Why aren't I being nicer to myself? Because it takes time and forgiveness and remembering that we've fallen off the wagon and getting back on and beginning again and falling off the wagon and beginning again. So, but thank you all so much. I really appreciate your participation, and your comments in the chat were really very insightful and very thoughtful. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hi, Jung. I see some My Search Inside Yourself friends. Thank you.
Okay, I will end the meeting now.
Okay.
Thank you, Tracy. That was awesome. I'll follow up.
Was it helpful? Oh, good.
It was amazing. Amazing. Oh, I think Jung wants to say something. No?
Just
What?
so thank you, and making it happen. So thank you, Betsy. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.
The part I miss sorry. No, I was just going to say the part I miss about in-person events is you get to have that little chit chat with people before and afterwards, you know, and we don't get that with these virtual meetings. But I think it looked like we had well over 50 people attending for the whole time. So that was really amazing, especially,
Yeah.
yeah. So
And I felt like the time went very fast. I didn't know if
it
you thought
did.
that too, but it felt like flew by. So
Yeah, it was great. I thought it was great. And to finish with that meditation was really great. I need to practice that more. Well, all of
we all
it.
do.
So
We all do. And Betsy, I just really want to remind you that you're not alone and that it's very hard to be kind to yourself. So don't think that, this is something, oh, I got that, I learned, I got it. It's a practice. And, I've spent 50 something years not. And so like to change, it's a slow process. So really, really just be kind to yourself in the process.
yeah, it's a hard, it is a practice.
Yes.
Especially when you we didn't talk about that, but when you feel like you've made a big mistake, to really let go. I feel like I can be a little bit more self-compassionate just with the day-to-day stresses, like the just navigating the kids or whatever. But when you really feel like you just didn't do the right thing, that's always where I find it really hard.
Yes, and I have this story that I share that I didn't share, but I talk about when I just fairly quick. I know you said you have to get on another call, but I submitted. A friend of mine asked me to submit a blog post for her company, and I did not have enough time to do it, but I said yes anyway. I knew that I was really pressed for time. So I wrote up a really rough draft, and then I said to her, please take a look at this, give me your feedback, and I'll make some changes. And the next thing I know, she posted it because she, it wasn't on her. And I was like, oh my God, you're such an idiot. Why did you do that?